And speaking of missions, we got a real live missionary here tonight. Zach, come on up if you will. And I asked Zach if he would come and give you a more detailed report than I've been giving you and speak to us from his heart. Zach, it's good to have you tonight. And just come up here and tell the people what you're doing and what you're going to do and all that, okay? God bless you, my friend.
Well, it is good to be in the house of the Lord tonight, is it not? Well, Pastor Moreau, I thank you for giving me this opportunity to give an update to all of you of where we're at, what we've been doing, and what we have been doing over the past 2 years. And if you would, let's turn into the scriptures real fast, because there is a verse I want us to look at tonight, Jeremiah 33:3. If you would open up your Bibles to Jeremiah 33:3. There is a verse I wish for us to look at tonight before I move into sharing what the Lord has been doing and what has been happening with us over the past 2 years. But Jeremiah 33:3 states this. It says, and this is the Lord speaking to Jeremiah here, saying, "Call unto me, and I will answer thee, and show thee great and mighty things which thou knowest not." Now, when you look at this and you put the background to this, we have Jeremiah here sitting in prison for preaching the Word of God. And he's facing this at this time, this crisis situation where not only is he sitting in prison, but then the kingdom has been invaded by the Babylonians, and they have surrounded the city of Jerusalem. And so he's sitting there, and no doubt Jeremiah felt the pain of his people suffering as well as the anguish of his own imprisonment during these days. But as would any believer imprisoned for his faith, though, this faithful prophet sought the Lord in prayer, and God met his dear servant's need. God answered Jeremiah. And told Jeremiah that he had the power to answer prayer in verse 2, because God makes a comment in verse 2 that he is the creator, for thus saith the Lord, maker thereof, the Lord that formed it to establish, the Lord is his name. In other words, God is the one who's created it all. He is the one who has formed all the universe. He is the one who has set it into place, and he is the one who holds it all together. And his name is Lord, Yahweh, Jehovah. And he is the only true and living God. The creator of the universe has the power to answer prayer. And he has the power to meet the needs of his people. And so what can we learn from this verse? Well, what we learn from this verse is that God will answer the prayers of his people. No matter what the crisis is, the Lord will meet their needs. He will either remove the crisis or give us the strength to walk through that crisis. Either way, God will always act for our good and make us stronger than we have been ever before. God will make all things out for the good to all those who truly love him and are called to live according to his purpose on this earth. So how can this verse possibly apply to, for example, myself in Deputation? Well, going through Deputation and learning and seeing how this verse can be applied, while the road of Deputation doesn't hold the same crisis of which Jeremiah was facing with imprisonment and the crisis going on with Jerusalem, Deputation itself does have its challenges and its hardships. This is why I believe it's good for every believer, not only missionaries, to keep this verse present in our minds. No matter how hard things may get, no matter what may come against us, no matter how the devil may attack us, the Lord will still hear our prayers, and he will answer them according to his will and according to our good as well. If we trust in God and pray unto him, he shall answer us and show us great and mighty things. And this we have seen throughout Deputation for the past 2 years many times while being on the road. And I was originally started Deputation in January of 2020. Went to my first church, presented in our first church, the first church that invited us in North Carolina at the end of February, and then 2 weeks later, COVID happened. And so COVID shut missionary work, Deputation down for pretty much the next few months. For about 3 months of making phone calls and emails, there was no responses whatsoever from the churches. But soon enough, after 3 months, the Lord started opening up the doors again. And the schedulings were starting to be made. And so finally in August of 2020, we finally hit the road and got on the road of Deputation permanently, week after week, going and not stopping. And then towards the end of 2020 is, of course, when my marriage happened with my lovely wife, Maria, where I went down to Costa Rica to get married. And then she joined me later on, about a year later, once her paperwork came in from the government, from the U.S. government. And so, throwing out some statistics here of what have been going on, Deputation took us 2 years and 2 months, finishing way ahead of the average by God's blessing, because before COVID, the average for a missionary family to raise funds was 3.5 years. The time frame of which we traveled, and within that time frame, I made close to 10,000 phone calls to churches. Out of those 10,000 phone calls, the Lord blessed us with about 205 bookings. Out of those 205 bookings, 47% of them have taken us on for support. And through God's blessing, as Pastor had said the other day, we have reached 100% of our needed support. We have traveled to a total of 29 states, 181 cities, accumulated about 118,000 miles on our car, which is about the same as traveling around the earth 4.5 times. We are blessed to say that through this, we have learned many things, but unfortunately we have learned many things for good, but we also have learned many things of which not to do as well. Few churches in America are like FBT. There are quite a few churches doing really well, but unfortunately, at the same time, there are a lot of churches who are not doing well at all. While I was in a church that was without a pastor for more than 4 years, we ran across a gentleman who was a missionary for the United States, going around and preaching in churches. He told us that he personally knew of 300 independent Baptist churches that are without a pastor. I was in a church where they were only running 2 members that were in their 70s. But yet, when I talked with them, the saddest part of all was that they thought they were doing okay, because their statement was, well, there's not much that we can do. I saw another church meeting in a building that was sinking into a swamp, leaning to one side. And in all honesty, that building should have been condemned, but yet they were still meeting because this is the only place they had. FBT, please never take for granted the things that the Lord has given to you here, because there's few churches like FBT throughout the United States. And I pray that you never take it for granted, because the moment you do is when you start getting into trouble. But while seeing some of these churches and traveling around and seeing a lot of the good churches and also seeing some of the bad situations with churches, we've experienced some stories, some God stories and some funny stories. And one of the God stories, at least 2 of them I like to share with you tonight, is the first is that there was one time, a couple times, matter of fact, while I was making phone calls and filling up our schedulings, that sometimes we would receive a phone call from a church a couple weeks that we were scheduled to be with a couple weeks in advance. And they would call and cancel, and I was wondering, well, what in the world, what is God doing? And my questioning within the same day, and this happened 3 or 4 times, within the same day, 3 more churches called and scheduled us to be with them. Also, in another story that happened to us while on deputation, we traveled to a town, and we were in a hotel room, and 2 hours before the church service was to start, the pastor called and canceled us that morning. And I thought, what in the world are we going to do? And so I had to rely upon the Lord. And I said to Maria, well, we're not too far away from a pastor that knows me from when I was in college, so let's just drop in on them. And so we traveled, and the church was 2 hours away, so we had just enough time to make it. And so we traveled 2 hours down to that church, and we're there, and the pastor saw me. He said, Zach, come into my office. And he said, Zach, since you're here, I'm going to have you pray for the service. And so we go back into the service, and I go up and I pray for the service. And then when I go to sit down, the pastor got up after me and said, you know what? We've had some missionaries leave the field. We've had some missionaries retire or come back home. And you know, we got some openings, and we have some funds available, and we got some missionaries here. And I think it's a good day to take on some missionaries. And I thought, man, that must have been a good prayer. But the Lord supplied, even when I did not know what was happening. Some fun stories for you is when Maria first came into the country, she experienced culture shock from being, since she's from Costa Rica here in the United States. And while traveling across many of these little towns in the United States, we would come to these main street towns and she would see it and she'd be like, it's just like the movies. In another church, while we were traveling, we were staying in a cabin that the church was having us stay in, and one of the members of the church lived next to it, who was originally from Mexico, but he had married into a family of the church, and his father-in-law taught him how to go deer hunting. Well, he sent me a text one night saying, hey, do you and your wife want to come see a deer skinning? And me, myself, I never saw one, and I know definitely my wife never saw one, because in Costa Rica, the national animal is the deer. So it's illegal to hunt them in Costa Rica. And so I said to her, sweetie, do you want to go see a deer skinning? We're being invited to see one. And she said, yeah, let's go. I was like, okay. And then one last story, funny story here with our travels. When Maria first came into the country last year, we went to Ohio, and it was winter, and so we were in a missions conference in Ohio, and the missions pastor had learned that Maria had never seen snow in her entire life. And so he went in front of the congregation and said, we have a missionary wife here who's never seen snow, and we need to pray for snow tonight. So the entire church prays for snow. And then the next night, we come to the church service, and after the service, it starts snowing. And so they all come up to Maria and say, go see the snow, go see the snow. And so she goes outside, sees the amazement on her face. And then afterwards they go, okay, can we stop praying for snow now? We have seen many different stories, many fun stories. But we've also seen answered prayer as well. Not only has the Lord supplied 100% of our needed support, I was praying that the Lord would supply it by the start of December. But in God's faithfulness, He supplied it by the end of October. The funds, another answered prayer that we have is we were raising funds for our truck. And many of our supporting churches came alongside us and helped us with it, but thanks to God blessing us through you, FBT, we have crossed the finish line for the funds for the truck. And we thank you. And then finally, the last answer to the prayer that we saw that completely amazed us was with Maria's green card. We were praying and praying and praying that we would have that green card before our goal of getting to Panama in January. But Maria, we were doubting, we were thinking, man, it averages a year and a half of getting it. It's only been a year. We just don't know. It might be another 6 months. But the Lord supplied. We were still expecting a medical exam. We were still expecting an interview with the embassy itself. But then 4 weeks ago, we got a message from the government saying your green card has been mailed. And I thought, God is awesome. No medical exam, no interview with the embassy, which are requirements for the green card. But God bypassed it to make sure that we can be ready to go when we need it to go. And so with the next steps here, which we will be doing, we're going to be leaving here on the 31st in 2 days. And we're going to be flying down to Panama. And we're going to be spending the month of January in Panama getting ready, opening up bank accounts, getting a truck ordered and in line for us, and many other things that we need to check on and get ready in order for us to settle down within the country. And so we're going to be there for a month, getting everything ready. And then we're going to be coming back at the start of February, which then I have to be at a conference in Alabama for a week in February, preaching at a conference out in Alabama, and then coming back and getting everything packed and ready to go and shipped down. And then we're praying and hoping that we will be officially leaving, permanently leaving at the end of March. And to give you an update of what's happening with the church in Panama, with Stan and Jackie Sherwood, who are constructing the new church building in Panama, I was talking with him today, and he was sharing with me that pretty much the church building construction is done. And what they are waiting on is they're waiting on documents from the electrician, and they're waiting on documents of certification for the gas line pipes before they can request the inspection for the occupancy permit. But despite waiting for that permit before they can officially open the church, they still have been holding services, but without running the buses. And this past Christmas service, with no buses running, they had 80 people at the Christmas service. And many of those families actually ended up walking to the church. So the building is pretty much complete. They laid some sod down. They're having one of the things that he said that is looking to possibly get here for the property is a lawnmower so they can cut the yard. Another machine to clean the floors within the church building itself. And so they are looking and prayerfully praying that the inspection for the church building will be done within the next 2 weeks. And when he told me that, I was like, oh man, so the Lord's worked it out to where we're going to be with you guys when you officially open. And so they are excited to finally have us coming down, because every time we talked with them, they said, are you guys done yet? Because we need you here. And I'm glad that we are able now to say, yes, we are done and we are on the way. Some prayer requests that we have for you tonight that we would like for you to be praying for us for. The first is safe travels to Panama. Safe travels while we're there, getting everything prepared for our arrival, and safe travels back. Please be praying that when we order the truck, that there will be no hiccups and that will go smoothly in the process of handling that. And then finally, please be praying for the church in Boquete, that they will be receiving the permits they need to officially open the church building and finally be able to have church services officially. FBT, Maria and I are both so gracious for your support, for your prayers, for your encouragement. Every time we are home, you shower love upon us, and we are so grateful for that. We thank you for holding a reception for us a year ago, back this past February, so you could be a part of celebrating our marriage with us. We thank you for supplying the funds that we needed for the truck. We thank you for standing next to us and sending us out into the harvest field as your representatives to reach the lost souls of Panama, to see those who come to believe discipled, to see those who come to believe, seeing God calling those into the ministry that have come to believe, seeing leaders trained and prayerfully, and hopefully one day see churches planted all throughout Panama, and hopefully one day see Panama themselves send missionaries out to the uttermost parts of the world. That's the reason why we're going. And we thank you for everything that you have done, and God bless you, FBT. And I pray, as I said earlier, please don't ever take for granted the things that you have here that the Lord has blessed you with. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you, God. He was sitting on the front row before he spoke, and I didn't even see Maria till he got up here. Maria, stand up if you will, and we welcome you back home again, your second home. And she has her mother with her from Costa Rica as well, and we welcome you both here tonight. God bless you, and I hope it'll be warmer where you're going. Summertime down there, isn't it? Yeah. Well, let's go to the Lord in prayer here. And we have 8 or 9 missionary families out of our church, plus we support another 70 or so missionary families every month. So there's a lot of people you could pray for. And I think sometimes, though, reading missionary biographies and so on in the past, they so appreciate it when they know that there's a few people just pray for them every day. And so there's enough people in our church. If a dozen people said, you know what, of the missionaries that we have, I'm going to pick out Zach and Maria, and I'm going to pray for them every day. And then another 10 or 15 people pray for another family every day. And you just take them on as your personal prayer project. And then when you read the letters, you will know that God is hearing you. He's working in their midst, in their life. So you might think about that this year. As you make your plans for the new year, you're going to pick out a missionary, and you're going to pray for that missionary family, the work that they're doing. You pray for them every day in your devotion time.